Why is it so important to you to own it when you have a military presence there, which you could expand to affect security?
Because when we own it, we defend it. You don't defend leases the same way. You have to own it.
In 1959, on the frozen plains of northwestern Greenland, a city emerged not above the ice, but beneath it. Bathed in artificial light and powered by a nuclear core, it was a triumph of engineering in a place no human city was meant to exist.
So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult.
But behind the glow of progress, a quieter question loomed. Why build something so permanent in a place so inhospitable? Marvel beneath the ice. From the outside, Camp Century was a scientific outpost, cloaked in optimism. Beneath 8 meters of ice, American military engineers constructed something astonishing. Not a shelter, but an entire city. This was not a cluster of tents or a chain of metal huts where researchers clung to survival in sub-zero winds. Camp Century offered movie screenings, hot showers, a barber shop, and even a chapel, all humming with electricity drawn from the world's first portable nuclear reactor. At the center of the operation stood PM-2A, quietly radiating heat and power, making the impossible seem routine in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. To the public, Camp Century was science fiction come to life. The United States Army proudly broadcast color footage of daily life underground, welcoming journalists and scout troops as if this were a national park beneath the snow. Engineers demonstrated how the tunnels were carved using a cut-and-cover technique, downplaying the scale of machinery and the permanence of the build. Everything was clean, controlled, and designed to inspire awe. But even in these curated glimpses, something didn't quite add up. The sheer comfort of Camp Century wasn't just unusual, it was unnecessary. For a project said to focus on climate research, the infrastructure seemed exaggerated. It wasn't just livable, it was built to last. Cracks in the story. As the outside world marveled at Camp Century's sleek amenities and self-sustaining design, quiet inconsistencies began to ripple beneath the surface. For a station built to house just 200 scientists, the scale of construction was wildly out of proportion. Typical polar research outposts relied on compact, modular structures flown in by aircraft or delivered via small sled teams. Yet, Camp Century received vast convoys of heavy machinery. Moving across Greenland's frozen expanse in waves the military called heavy swings. These were not carrying microscopes or snow samplers. They hauled cement mixers, reinforced steel beams, and tunneling equipment manufactured in Switzerland, gear more appropriate for digging subway tunnels than studying glaciers. The scale of these deliveries raised a quiet but persistent question. What exactly were they building under all that ice? The sheer weight and volume of the materials hinted at something far more complex than a science station. The logistics network rivaled that of a small industrial city, not an Arctic laboratory. For every camera-friendly image of troops reading books or celebrating holidays, there were tons of infrastructure pouring into a place where no permanent population would ever reside. And then there was the geography. The base wasn't located for climate efficiency. It sat along the shortest flight path between Washington and Moscow, a corridor of strategic significance during the Cold War. And that strategic logic didn't vanish when the Cold War ended. But in 1959, that same logic took a different form. Concrete, steel, and tunnels pushed under the ice. If weather data had been the real objective, almost anywhere else on the ice sheet would have sufficed. But this location suggested a different kind of alignment. The train that wasn't there. Beneath the warmth and noise of Camp Century's upper levels, a second, quieter network was taking shape, one that few ever saw. While scientists mapped ice cores and watched Hollywood films in prefab lounges, engineers below tested something that made no sense for a climate research base: a full-scale underground railway. Technical drawings and rare archival photographs revealed tunnels unlike any found in Arctic stations. Vaulted, wide, and reinforced, their height and girth exceeded any human necessity. Instead of cramped walkways or narrow sled tracks, these subterranean corridors featured steel rails embedded into compacted snow, along which flatbed rail cars moved back and forth with simulated loads weighing tens of tons. This wasn't infrastructure for transporting samples or supplies. It was designed to move something large, heavy, and mobile, something not meant to be seen. The heavy-duty Swiss tunneling machines, previously thought to support living quarters, were in fact used to dig out this oversized transport system. Engineers in the lower levels logged performance data on metal fatigue, thermal contraction, and structural stress. These were not the concerns of a geologist or glaciologist. They were the calculations required for maintaining a functioning subterranean logistics system. And the most telling detail was spatial. These tunnels did not terminate under the camp. They stretched outward, vanishing into darkness, like the arteries of a system still under construction. If Camp Century was only a station, then what or who was meant to travel through it? The base had all the features of a transit hub, except for one chilling absence: there was no train. Project Iceworm. The missing train finally surfaced, on paper. In 1997, decades after Camp Century's closure, declassified United States military documents exposed the project's real name and purpose: Project Iceworm. Far from being an Arctic research station, the facility was the prototype for a covert nuclear launch system buried beneath Greenland's ice. The plan was audacious. If successful, it would have turned the entire ice sheet into a vast mobile missile platform, capable of launching a second-strike nuclear assault against the Soviet Union from below the radar, both figuratively and literally. The details were staggering. United States military engineers proposed constructing an underground tunnel network stretching up to 4,000 kilometers across the ice, forming a frozen web beneath 130,000 square kilometers of Greenland. Inside this subterranean labyrinth would travel 600 Iceman missiles, a modified version of the Minutemen, designed for deployment from mobile rail cars moving continuously through the ice. The logic was simple. Mobility meant invisibility. By ensuring that missile locations were always changing, Iceworm would be immune to preemptive strikes. But concealment came at a price. Denmark, the sovereign nation responsible for Greenland, had expressly forbidden nuclear weapons on its territory. Iceworm moved forward without their knowledge or consent. The entire operation, from the scale of construction to the deployment of warheads, was a geopolitical sleight of hand carried out behind the back of an ally. The PM-2A nuclear reactor, once celebrated as a peaceful innovation, was in fact a prototype, intended to power the missile trains of Iceworm's underground fleet. And the men stationed at Camp Century, many unaware of the project's true mission, were inadvertently maintaining a Cold War doomsday machine in its experimental stage. Nature does not forget. For all its technical precision and strategic foresight, Project Iceworm collapsed under the one force it failed to fully consider: the glacier itself. In their calculations, American engineers had treated Greenland's ice as stable, imagining it as a vast frozen foundation capable of holding shape for decades. But a glacier is not static. It flows. It bends and compresses under its own weight. Within just 3 years of Camp Century's operation, reality began to surface. Walls bulged inward, ceilings sagged, and steel supports warped like softened wire under immense pressure. The slow crushing force of the moving ice could not be resisted. No amount of excavation or reinforcement could prevent the tunnels from collapsing. The once smooth rail lines twisted into useless arcs, and machinery meant to maintain the system became entombed in the very substance it sought to master. It was a defeat not delivered by enemy fire or a diplomatic backlash, but by the ancient, shifting weight of nature itself. In 1966, the United States military ordered a full evacuation. The nuclear reactor was dismantled and removed. Everything else was abandoned. More than 9,000 tons of infrastructure, 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, hazardous PCB-laced insulation, and vast volumes of radioactive wastewater left to freeze in place. At the time, this seemed acceptable. Scientists believed the ice would continue to accumulate, sealing Camp Century forever beneath a growing, silent tomb. But they had built their exit plan on a false assumption: that ice, like secrets, never melts. When the ice melts. For decades after Camp Century's closure, the world largely forgot what was left beneath Greenland's surface. The belief that the ice would preserve and bury it forever remained unchallenged. But the climate has changed. and with it, so has the behavior of the glacier that once entombed America's secret city. According to recent research by scientists like William Colgan and Horst Mach-Guth, the Greenland ice sheet is no longer growing, it's shrinking. Melting now exceeds snowfall, and the tomb is starting to open. As temperatures rise, meltwater doesn't just vanish, it seeps downward, cutting narrow channels through the ice, acting as both lubricant and solvent. That water is beginning to reach the remains of Camp Century. When it does, it won't just displace the steel and debris, it will stir a toxic mix of diesel fuel, PCBs, and radioactive waste that was never meant to re-enter the ecosystem. Once that mixture finds a path, it could flow invisibly through the glacier's natural drainage, eventually spilling into coastal waters and Arctic food chains. Yet even as these risks come into sharper focus, political will remains frozen. The United States government insists that the 1951 base agreement absolved them of cleanup duties. Denmark, wary of implicating itself in Cold War-era negligence, remains largely silent. Scientific teams are forbidden from drilling directly into the waste zone. Camp Century has shifted from a military secret to a scientific no-go zone. Its greatest danger not what it once was, but what it may still become. Greenland's other secret. In 2016, NASA's Operation Icebridge uncovered something massive beneath Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier, a 31-kilometer-wide crater, likely formed by a mile-wide asteroid striking Earth thousands of years ago. Though unrelated to Camp Century, its presence echoed a deeper truth. Greenland's ice doesn't just preserve, it conceals. Whether it's a Cold War missile platform or an ancient impact, the ice has a long history of holding on to world-altering events. Both the crater and the city tell the same story. What's buried beneath Greenland can change what happens far beyond it. As the ice thins, these forces are returning to view, not as distant history, but as active participants in our future. What we once trusted to remain frozen is beginning to rise, and the question no longer is if these secrets will surface, but how prepared we are when they do. They built it to disappear, sealed in silence, buried in ice. But glaciers don't forget, and the past always finds a way through the cracks. If history is surfacing through the melt, what else lies beneath? Tap subscribe and tell us what should never be buried.